We're now going to look at a critical component, which is relationships. We know that so many veterans do bring the war home, and that in bringing the war home, they are then perceived as the enemy by their own family. I'd like you to draw on your experiences of coming home, what worked, and where things became complicated and challenging. Thank you. All right, so gentlemen, now we go to the most critical and complex territory that a veteran will ever have to navigate through, which is relationships. My understanding of sitting with guys over the years, including my own checkered history, is that as much as we fight the enemy while we are away, we bring the enemy back home in terms of our presence, and we become the enemy within our families. The war that lived outside of us now becomes the war that lives through us in our homes. I think this is probably one of the most critical ones, because we know that the divorce rate can be huge in the veteran and first responder community. So I think the goal today is just to dive into within the sort of 5 minutes. It's a quick tour through it, but what is your understanding, either with the veterans you know, your own personal experience, what has worked, because you've had to balance out the demands of service and the demands of relationship? And what we're trying to do is distill the core truths that those watching this can hold on to, in terms of the modalities you use, the skill sets, the attitudes, to help you navigate and maintain the relationships that many of you still do have. All right, as always,
Starting with me again.
Marin,
Sweet.
start with you, Dan.
A relationship. So, understanding, right, and respect is what I've learnt. Is how relationships work. Understanding, that everybody has their own lives and they're living, and everyone carries a story, right? So everyone's carrying their own story. That being my wife, that being my kids, that being my own friends, my other veteran friends. But also respecting that as well. But respecting that they interpret words, values differently to what I do. And then bringing it back to understanding and asking the question, instead of, firing off in my anger, which I've learned to do is to understand what they're coming from and what I'm interpreting.
Yep.
All right. So if I'm confused before I fire off, I'd be like, what do you mean by that?
Yep.
Right. Like, and, my wife and I are at 19 years of marriage. And again, we've had ups and downs, almost divorced. But we've learnt to understand each other and respect each other over these years. So, maturity comes in those relationships. And one of the biggest things that I try to instill in veterans and especially my kids, in the world we live in now is understand, ask questions to understand, and respect that you might not agree with what someone's doing or saying, but just respect it. You don't have to turn into that angry warrior because you feel you need to be that. So in every relationship, understand and respect it
Spot on.
and carry yourself forward that way.
So I think the whole concept, I think, that seek first to understand before you expect to be understood.
Yeah.
It demands an ability to have some level of impulse control on our wounds, on our pain, on our grief. And I think what we've looked at so far today is so much of what we've looked at is the ability to keep our bodies clear, to work on the healing internally as we try to move forward into our worlds. I think that I always use the concept of cleaning a weapon. Where a weapon gets dirty, as we know, you're going to get an accidental discharge, which we've talked about, is those outbursts of anger. And where we are not keeping our weapons clean, we're going to get a runaway gun, which is this one's firing out of control. Or you get your stoppage, your depressions, your anxiety. The modalities we've talked about today determine our ability to successfully achieve the self-control and the ability to understand, because we do know that if we want to figure out the cracks we've got, have a relationship. And if you want to figure out where the rest are, have some kids. So we do the ground stuff, and then we get to that capacity to understand. And I think a good point, seek first to understand before you expect to be understood.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dan. Good wisdom. JJ?
Relationships. Well, if I'm to be honest, I can't give you $5 if I don't have $5. What's he mean? So if I don't love myself, how can I love others? My first relationship that I had to work on, which I didn't realize, was myself, because I hated myself. You know, I hated everything that I represented, everything that I did, even though I did nothing wrong, you know, but for some reason I just built this hate towards myself. And that's turns to the pills and the alcohol and all the rest of it. Talked about this, you know. But the day that I started to forgive and you know, love JJ again, I started to open up and be able to start to help and love other people, my wife and my kids. I've always loved my wife and my kids and my family and my close friends, don't get me wrong, but sometimes I haven't been present there though, because I got stuck in myself, you know, and so learning to forgive myself and then go from there was perfect. So, and then like Dan said, touched on that, like, you know, 26 years with me and Nikki. And I say to other people, I often say, like, if I could melt down all of my medals that I have, I'd give my wife that one, because she deserves it. She's been through everything that I've been through, you know, and good times and bad times. And I'm so grateful today that she's still with me and my kids are with me. My grandkids, you know, they ring up and they want to FaceTime me and all this sort of stuff, you know. If I was still stuck in self and still a raging alcoholic and all the rest, then no one wants to be around that. And I understand that. I didn't want to be around that, you know. So yeah, for me, and we talked about it before, there's two paths. We have two paths. So something happens, you're either choosing to forgive or you have to make an amends. You know, which one is it? I did nothing wrong though, JJ. Okay, cool. Forgive the person. Let it go. Or, no, I did something wrong. I said something wrong. I did something 5 years ago wrong, whatever it may be. It's come back to haunt me. Make an amends for this. Let it go, you know. Otherwise, I'm carrying baggage that I just don't need. And I can't help anyone if I'm carrying all the baggage. Why am I carrying something that happened 20 years ago? Let it down. Let it go. JJ, let it go. It's too heavy. Once I started doing that, things got lighter. And then I'm able to then be of service to help other people who are struggling.
So it's that, JJ, it's that capacity to really take time to demonstrate self-compassion, which I think is a very difficult one, isn't it? Because in terms of our backgrounds, we have such high tolerance of discomfort that we often put ourselves last in the formula. And what you pointed out is that when we put ourselves first for a moment, we are able to really open our hearts to the people that love us. And our greatest gifts and our challenges are our partners and our children. Well,
Right.
good wisdom. Thanks, JJ. Trusty.
So relationships for me have been very challenging. And I think a lot of that stemmed from, even in defense, it was as if I was living separate existences. My life at work would be one thing, and then I'd leave that environment and leave that world and then go back home and spend some time at home with my wife at the time. But that was always very limited because everything was about returning to work and then going and being in that world. And there was a lot of things that didn't get discussed between us as well. So there was already that kind of build up of separation, of her understanding what I was going through, and especially if I didn't understand it myself. And then as when I discharged and as I got progressively worse, the burden that was put on her was vast. She ended up being my full-time carer and had to deal with me at my absolute worst. So it put an insane amount of stress on our relationship. And then as that relationship we started to have troubles, we went to seek out counseling, because that was the conventional thing to do, is go see counselors. And I think the second counselor that we ended up seeing, the first thing that she said when we came in was, "Don't worry, honey, my ex-husband was an army guy too. I understand what you're going through." So again, that was just reinforcing a lot of the dramas that I was already having. As I was the problem, I needed to take myself out of the equation. And that really led to severe suicidal ideation and the rest of it. Again, for me, the catalyst was probably going down unconventional routes of different medicines. But in that itself, that drove a further wedge between us, because she didn't join me on that journey. She wasn't able to. In fact, her going back to the counselors led her to be on antidepressants as well. So we both ended up being drugged up, and it seemed like drugs were the only answer in that. So when I started to go down these unconventional routes, that drove a wedge between us even further. And it set me into further isolation on my journey of kind of getting better. But again, that catalyst for me in doing medicines that allowed me to become more internally reflective and start using my brain to actually think about things. One of the big things that the medicines did for me was help me start to look at things from other people's perspective. Because quite often I'd be reactive and I'd try to get my point across to go, this is how I feel. How don't you understand that? But then on reflection and being able to look at things, I could see that there was no understanding in that because someone's living from a completely different perspective of their view on the world. But I had not had that lens to be able to look through. So that helped me a lot start to understand people's other perspectives, which also helped me not be angry. Because I used to be angry, not only at myself, but everyone around me if they didn't understand what was going on. But understanding their perspective really helped me in that too. And I think that led for me to be able to forgive not only myself, but also those who I felt had done me wrong. And that enabled me to move on from my relationship. But it also helped us to maintain a different relationship now where our focus is the kids and our shit is put aside. Sorry, our problems put aside. And we are now focusing on the well-being of each other so that each other is able to look after the kids and make sure that they get the best possible outcome in a situation that's not obviously ideal.
Sure, yeah. And Frosty, I think, if you think about it, the one thing with operations, and we've all talked about it, is we encapsulate. You have to encapsulate. You can't do the job unless you can encapsulate. And encapsulation is a bit like a skin around the heart, a thick bit of a skin. And I was saying that it's like we've all got this dial down switch. It's like we look a bit mute, but we're not. We feel deeply. But relationships demand that that skin becomes more permeable. And this is the hardest thing. The second thing is that the veteran reality is that if we face a threatening force, we're well skilled in targeted aggression. And so anything that we perceive as threatening activates that wiring. For the wiring to be deactivated means we have to heal the wall around our hearts. We have to do the healing work that you did describe, the forgiveness of self, but also the understanding of self and the territory you walk in. Until our map is fixed, or it's clearer and our compass is orientated effectively, we are lost. So those are really important things, the ability to heal the heart and to change the wiring so that people do not start to look like the enemy. And it does, it's hard, eh? It's easy said to behave, but not so easy to do when the other suddenly feels like the enemy, and that's that old wiring takes over. Yeah, so thank you. So-
Cheers, Frosty. I couldn't figure out why, and defense is quite a unique workspace. I couldn't figure out why, when work was going really good, the relationship with the wife was going really bad. When the relationship with the wife was going really good, work was going really bad. It was just this thing. And I was that guy that, came back from deployment and I call her my then wife, not my ex-wife, because I do stand for a positive future. My then wife said, you're not the man I married. And it's really scary when it comes to relationships because there comes a point where you start going, okay, what do I know? I know I'm in pain and I can see I'm causing pain to others. And if I honestly look into the future with this, like you said, this mesh around my heart, I can't see that changing. And then you start thinking, you know what? I'm going to do everyone a favor. I'm going to end the pain to me. I'm going to end the pain to you by removing myself from the situation because that's some crazy way to create a solution, right?
Understood.
And thank goodness, I'm still here, but I can honestly say now that there's kind of that was the immature version of me saying that, okay? Because if I really look at that, if I was to remove myself from the situation to stop pain, me doing that would multiply the pain to everyone I knew by about 1,000. Okay, so I would be kidding myself. It would be a very immature way to think that suicide would be removing pain from the situation. It would be multiplying it. But now I actually see that, I get pissed off like anyone else, but I'm like, hang on, all those things that are pissing me off in a relationship are there to remind me where I'm actually immature or potentially where I need to be healed. And they're actually saying, hey, Tim, this is your bridge to now actually uh, I think it's hard to be vulnerable, especially for warrior types. I think we've got to start with being gentle, you know. So I thought, well, this is them
Yeah.
pissing me off is my opportunity to be gentle.
Yeah.
And then if I'm really willing to go there and step into that space of vulnerability, I find something magic happens there. Um, I can't quite give it words, but something transforms and it happens so much easier than if I tried to do it in ways that were familiar to me.
Because vulnerability, I don't know, maybe, I mean, my generation don't do vulnerability very easy. And to be honest, I don't do vulnerability easy at all. We'll be watching a movie and my wife will go, "You're okay?" And I'll go, "Yep." She'll go, "No, you're not." I go, "I'm fine. I can see you're not fine. I'm fine." And the other part of my head goes, "You got to be joking. You're a psychologist and you kind of, a little bit of self-reflection going on here." But vulnerability it's like paws in the air, belly exposed.
Yeah, well, I think something bad's going to happen. It's going to be my fault
Yeah.
because for some reason, me being vulnerable, I've equated to being something. Some enemy is going to come in.
Spot on.
Some enemy is observing me.
Yeah.
That ironically, if on the occasions I do really go into that vulnerable space, something really unusual pops out. Call it happiness. You know, it's a really strange kind of shift, and I feel it physically too.
Yeah.
You know, when I'm trying to get in my Zen state, I love my breath work, and there's some guy that pissed me off last week. I feel like that's God saying, "Hey, you want to connect? You got to remove this blockage." And when I truly see that, that it's the blockage I'm hanging on to that's stopping me getting into that state of who I really am,
Yeah.
and I let that go, it feels like a physical release. And to be sharing honestly, that's when I get a few of these ones, you know. And I notice if I get a morning gush, as I call it, I'm going to have a bloody good day.
Yeah. So I think it's an interesting paradox in that when we release our need for having our perimeter defenses, it's not the enemy that come in, but it's understandable that the intuitive wiring goes, you're vulnerable, you're at risk now. But what actually comes in is love. But to make that leap is not easy. And I want to thank you for bringing that up. So thanks, Matt.
Power
Ian.
of vulnerability.
Yeah, I never used to do vulnerability all that well either, but like I'll address this from two aspects, from relationships external to family and internal. But a person one day did me a great favor, and he said, "All you ever talk about is your illness." And if you sit with many veterans that come back with illnesses, that's their central focus of their life, and that's what they talk about. And if you go out and you talk to everybody about your illnesses all the time, and you talk to the same person again, you tell them exactly the same story, and before long, people don't want to come and talk to you. And I think that's something I learnt from someone being kind enough to tell me not to do that. And I think I'd like to pass that on to people that watch this, because it's so easy to do it.
That is after you had to hold yourself back from punching him.
I know, yeah. It's
Yep, thanks
That's
for
true.
making that visible.
but it's true. Yeah. It's a
I
shock.
hate that you're right.
Yeah, no, it's a shock. You know, and I think internally, you know, with the marriage, well, of course, you know, I'm always wrong. But I think that's the thing, is communication, which I don't do well. I know I've been married for 43 years, and I know I'm not the same person that I was, because my wife tells me I was. But that's not because she doesn't love me or anything. It's because she wants me to come back and be happy, and something like what I was. But you know, certainly being able to communicate with her and communicate with the children, um, uh, and I think if I'm, as you know, I've got a few businesses, and you know, family businesses, and you know, we had an incident once where things exploded, and I had to fix it up at the end somehow or other, and I had to simply do it, and it was just I wrote to the child, and I said, I'm sorry. I didn't know what I did, but I'd say I'm sorry, and then thankfully it rekindled the whole relationship. And I probably caused it. I just didn't know, because you just don't know what
But
you're
you
doing.
can't be conscious all the time of the territory you're operating in.
Yeah.
It's almost automatic.
But you know that you're sick somewhere.
Yeah.
And I just think my lesson from that, what I drew from it, was if something's turned really bad, say sorry. You don't have to win every argument or discussion, and give whenever you can during a discussion, so that the other person not wins, but I don't know. Yeah, I'll just say wins. I can't explain it any other way.
Well, maybe the win is the other person in the relationship has a chance to feel heard.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think also what you bring up for me is this concept of the wound. When we get stuck, it's where we take the wound. If we continually taking the wound into the family, they call it woundology. And there's only so many conversations that somebody's going to have before they go, it's enough. I think our responsibility is to acknowledge the wound is our doorway into powerful healing, but it needs to be done within the context of tribe. Because in tribe, we are heard and we are understood. And we have to make that choice about where we take it. Once we take it there, we're ready to communicate from that place through our wound into the people we love, and we create understanding. So, for example, I've done many debriefs with the partners of veterans. And I talk about what I can self-reflect on how I was and the guys I've been sitting with. And they go, geez, I get it. Now we've already created one bridge. The second thing I wrote is, it's really hard for us to talk. I mean, I personally find it very difficult to share the deeper parts of the horrors that we may have seen. So I wrote a letter which the guys could take and amend and hand over and go, read this, and then we can bridge into it. So as much as we share a responsibility for our own healing, we also need to support what surrounds the veterans and first responders to create bridges into them as well. And then we meet in the middle. So Ian, thanks for sharing that. Appreciate it. Bob, lost as always.
Yes. I've been married 45 years. I met my wife at high school. She's grown with me in that whole time. So my military career was not something that was anticipated when we met. How I was affected by military career wasn't. What happened afterward wasn't, etc. She grew with it. But I can't speak for her, but I would say she would say the most frustrating thing for her is that for almost half of my life, emotions have been dangerous. I do not want to open the emotions up because I don't know where it'll go. Sometimes it goes hot. Sometimes it just turns into mess. I don't know. So I distance and I disengage. And she would, if she was here now, I'm sure she would say that is the most dangerous and damaging thing in terms of our relationships, that fact that we distance and disengage. And she'll often say, classic Kados, when she says, you're not even here, I know what she means. And that is now the pull through for me. It's like, oh, whoa, okay, got to stop and think about that. What is it really difficult with relationships is your family live with you. They understand the journey because they sort of share it with you. So my children, they're all adult now. They're all adult children. And we've had to talk about what it was like when Dad was 90, 1998, when he was really literally just surviving. And my wife carried all the load and the kids adapted. And the couple were young enough to not really notice, but the oldest boy really did. And so we've had conversations after that now. And so it's interesting, how he perceived what he saw my wife and I going through at that time, and how he actually made sense of it in his own mind, and how he as a man is now he purposely seeks calmness, which is really interesting. So, and he says that's an expression of what I saw, because in his childhood he was out of control. And a lot of that was responding to things that he was seeing and the way things were working. So you carry a bit of guilt for that too, which is, so again, the best thing is talk about it. So if you're having that situation, you're in that situation, you got to talk about it.
Okay.
The one that's hard is that what I call the generational effect. So I don't know my daughter-in-laws as well as my children. And they are more inclined to get me triggered, and I love them dearly, but they'll do things that are just not in the construct of how our family works, because my family knows me and they know how to avoid it, but the daughter-in-laws don't. Okay. And the grandchildren don't. They will tell you what they see and feel. And I have literally had a over-the-top explosion with one of my granddaughters, with one of my daughter-in-laws. And fortunately, my son came to defend her, and I exploded at him. My wife said, that's the last straw. You've now taken this to another generation. And it was like, holy shit, you're right. Yeah. So I stopped immediately. I shouted, and I got my daughter-in-law, and I just held her and apologized. I said, I know you hate me right now, but I need you to not hate me right now. I need you to just understand. And it took her a while too, to understand what was going on. I can't even remember what it was about. It was frivolous rubbish. And again, had a few beers before it, which doesn't help either. But I think the key message about relationships is listen for the signals from the people who love you, because they're sending you a message, whether you know it or not.
You know, Bob, there you nailed it. So, I think the journey that we're all looking at over the course of these conversations is returning to ourselves and calling ourselves back to ourselves. And when we do that, we're capable of experiencing great love. So, guys, thanks for sharing your relationships journey. It was humbling. Thank you. Okay, what we're going to dip into now is probably one of the most critical components is the one of relationships. My observation has always been that some people come back and integrate well, others bring the war back home and the impact it has. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are and experiences are. If you can consolidate it into a very sharp jewel of 3 minutes, and then we can move through and hear what comes up. And those jewels will be critical for people that listen. So, Alex, what comes up for you with those?
Thanks, Barry. So first of all, let me say thank you very much for this opportunity, because relationships matter. That's the cornerstone of everything we do. And as people were talking, I was reflecting on the child psychiatry bits that my training has gone through. Perinatal work is very much about mirror neurons, and we've mapped this out. It's really lovely how a newborn baby with the gaze of mum, it's very biased, gaze of mum, and the eye gaze back, and you can see the security, and you can see that there's this dyad that will grow and foster, and the neurological bits all will grow and foster. That's the cornerstone, right? So when we talk about tribes, when we talk about trauma and stresses and all of that embodied in the service area of this human was fully formed before they arrived at Kapuka or elsewhere. They were even more fully formed right the way throughout. Injuries completing that sense of self, and then as they transition out, I was thinking back about the lessons learned from children who transition from primary school to high school to university, and onwards into life. That's a stress point. And if we don't have other people to help guide and navigate, if we have a map but no compass, the lost, right? The likelihood of bad becomes real. So when I think about relationships, this is the core stuff. And when there's a transition point in life, whether it is I've lost a loved one or if I lost part of my identity, now I don't know where to go to, this is the stuff that walks through my doors all the time. And you can see it in their eyes, because they walk in and I've got 5 seconds, maybe 5 minutes to give me enough time. I shake their hands and I know the clock's running in their head, thinking, feeling, can I trust you? And if I behave, say things in a particular way that disrupts that trust, it gets logged somewhere. And that's all about those mirror neurons firing away, thinking, can I trust this person? Can I trust this environment? Am I going to be led up the wrong corridor, set the wrong way, or can I come back again? So relationships matter entirely in this human, in all of these humans as they transition through and right the way throughout their career and service. The critical part now is we're far more aware, more than ever, that the stress points of service, whether it's peacetime service, wartime service, inclusive of exercises, deployments, and then the moral injury piece, that's a disruption to that ability to trust. And if we don't trust in the service, in the policies and doctrines, if we don't trust in people around us to guide and navigate and help us, genuinely help us, where are we? So inside defense establishments, when does someone call 1-800-I'm-sick? No one. When does someone rock up to the pops and say, Doc, actually, I've been feeling these things? No one, unless you want reputational damage and you want to finish your career and be sent off to CMAC. So we don't really want that. And so that relationship piece that says, when you arrive in this civilianized environment, having come from a very coded environment, what are the codes you want to teach me? And am I receptive to those codes? And are there enough signals in this environment that says, hey, and permission, if you rock up to that environment and signaling inside you goes, it doesn't feel right. Give yourself that self-respect and walk. Give yourself a self-respect and give curiosity. Maybe he, she, they are okay and they're do-gooders, but they just don't know how to do it well. And the relationship formation and the ability to make new formations really critical. Happens in the clinical environment, happens with Mr. and Mrs., happens with mums and dads, with children, grandparents, aunts and uncles, community. And so whether it's the human coming in, and we say it's in child psychiatry, right? We say when the child comes in, it's never just the child. It is the relationships with mom and dad. It is the siblings. It is the community and the schools. Same here. It is the person that represents all of where they've been and all of where they want to go that comes into the room. That speaks about relationships.
Thanks, Alex. And you know what you point to is the fact that we really find ourselves in the eyes, the reflection and the heart of the person facing us.
Right.
And when all the partner sees is war in the eyes of the veteran and the pain, or when the veteran sees the clinician rather than the human, we are not reflected. So thank you for highlighting that. Thank you, Ted.
I think it's a really interesting time as people sort of move. So I think we've kind of pointed out the idea that change is difficult, and I think that's a universal human experience. Change from one environment, from one relationship, but it's always difficult. But there are some things in particular about the sort of military life which exacerbate that. The most obvious one of those is that military is a total institution, and it is not like a job. It is not like being at school. It is the job all day. It's for a lot of for an early part of the time, but there's time on base. There's time when you're deployed. You're with these people all the time. You're within the environment all the time. It becomes very difficult within total institutions to actually perceive what's happening on the outside. So whatever would normally be the experience of people changing from one place to is exacerbated by the fact that it is an enormous change. It's not just letting go the 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. It's all 168 hours of the week. They're all changing. So I think that's the sort of first one. I think that is difficult to navigate, and in particular, on the issue of relationships, the relationships outside the total institution are different and may well have been neglected somewhat while you're kind of embedded in this institution. That's one issue. I think another.
We'll probably have to
Yep.
shift. So what I want to do is pick up on that issue.
Yep.
I think what you really point to the fact is that we need to be able to find ourselves in the situations we're in. And I think so much of what needs to happen is facilitating a mutual and shared understanding between different parties so that they can receive each other. It's not an easy one at all. I know you've got more, but we'll come back. So thanks, Ted. Appreciate it. Frosty.
I think relationships are probably one of the most important things. Again, isolation, I think, is the number one killer. You're not only isolated when you lead defense, but if you are isolated within your relationship, then that's a spell for disaster. Not only with the partners, and I think it's important for the partners to be supported on the journey of the veteran as well. If they're not supported in that, then it's an isolated journey. The family needs to understand what's going on in that so they can actually respond and support to that as well. And then the kids on top of that as well. One of the big issues I had with my young kids was figuring out what kind of activities I could do with them. I understood how to shoot guns. I understood how to drive boats. I understood how to yell really loud, but understanding how to play games with kids was just not something in my repertoire. So if I've only got access to those type of skill sets, I'm going to model things around that. Whereas activities with the kids that are supported in those environments, I think are incredible ways to bond the family together. And again, I think that family bonding is huge. I think going through things with the family, one of the big reasons I think we bond so well in defense is because we go through activities together where you're pushing yourself and you're surviving these incredible existences, and it's a lived experience thing that you go through where that bond is connected. But unless we're doing those kind of bonding relationships with our families, we're really not creating a bond. We're just drifting apart.
So it's really pointing to that need for veterans to expand on their playing tools and to find ways to connect outside of the parameters of being in the military. I think also is what we have talked about is the shared responsibility to help people to understand the very nature of the veteran that lives within their environment. And in that shared responsibility is the potential for connection. Yeah, thank you. Kate.
I think there's so much I could talk into here, but to keep it nice and potent and short is the core thread of all connection and relationships is communication. And if we're not communicating with ourselves, we can't communicate with others. And if our nervous system is at capacity, there is no space for communication. So are we coming from a place of depletion constantly? And that's where I see clients of mine and their families really butting heads is that the veteran is depleted, the partner is depleted, the kids, even though nothing is spoken out aloud of what's going on, because some people, for some reason these days, don't share anything, the kids feel it anyway. So you may as well talk about what's happening because they can energetically feel it and they're in the suffering anyway. So people put on this guise of everything's okay, we're all good. Why? This is what I'd like to see change is to people to actually communicate how they're feeling and what's going on, not only to themselves, to those that they love within their circle of influence, but their children.
And you know what I loved that reframe of you guys are okay. It's just your nervous systems are at their capacity. And that step back. Okay, so how do we downregulate our nervous system? Kate, that was gold.
As a
Thank you.
family, yeah.
Yeah, that was gold. Thank you. Then
My main reflection on my relationships is the strain that leaving really does transition onto them. I've learned to respond proportionately to situations, and by that I mean by taking out my chronic stress load and taking out my acute stress load. If I've had a busy day and it's put me in a state of stress, or if I've got a trigger that takes me back to something that is it's provokes quite a strong reaction. If I apply all of those to my responses to my children when they're misbehaving or something happens, it's so in proportion and it blows up the situation and it breaks trust. I think I really understand now that my responses for a long period of time have been disproportionate, and they've been unfair, and it's a selfish response to essentially what you're dealing with, and that breaks relationships. Now, I think I understand, it only takes one, improportionate response to break a relationship, forever to rebuild that trust, and the strain that our families hold, trying to hold us together.
it's not easy.
It's profound.
And so Ben, I think I love it. You're coming out with some great gems there. And I think the gem that for me comes out is that before we walk through the front doors of our home, make sure your barrel is clean. That is our responsibility. They're not here to clean our barrels. And if we don't clean our barrels, it's not that we bad, but it's, as you would put, our nervous systems are stretched to breaking point. So clean barrel, better household. Yep. Cure.
You ever seen or gone to approach someone with their dog at a cafe and pat it, and the dog retracts and they say, oh, they don't like men. And I thought, well, that's not a biological error. Someone's done something to that poor little animal, and its natural response is to retract from that sort of scene or that sort of person.
Yeah.
Relationships are critical, and everyone's done such justice. I think it's important to also highlight that for some of us, the relationships were never nurturing. They were never caring. And so you escape it to join a bigger family where there's more or less caring again. And so it becomes your norm to retract from being vulnerable and open and trusting. And so in a similar way to me, I think for me, neuroscience was a beautiful tool where I said, well, it's not who you are, mate. The brain's learnt to keep you safe. And so I formed a relationship with the biology, which was thanks for trying to sort of acceptance commitment style of therapy, let's say, on myself. But then that was curated by a good mentor again. The same gentleman who, when all I had was crass, filth and vulgar language coming out, I knew that most people would react. And so I was looking for a fight, and he didn't. He was still, he was quiet, and he said, tell me more. And I went, what's this voodoo he's playing with me right now? I'd never experienced someone just listen. and just the listening was validating. He said it's also, from what Kate said, communication comes from a couple of words meaning common union. He said between you and me there's a space, and in that space we join. And I felt the joining. I didn't think the joining. And so that feeling or experience I had in that moment really shifted a lot of things. So again, relationships, I think, knowing where the person may have come from, but also having the right mentors at the right time can play a really powerful role.
Yeah, I think, thanks, Kieran. I mean, yeah, the mentors are important. I think what you point out is that I lost my thought.
Can I add?
This is called overdrive.
So we know about the science of attachment, and this is just fundamental. We haven't done this study in Australia. In North America, and the American Army is much bigger than Australia. And we know that 80% of people, other ranks, joining the American Army come from less than desirable households. So you know that feeling of joy, yeah? And that's often missing, right? And when you don't have a secure adult that says, that's okay, you've got this, you know how to work this, let's get past that and keep on going, yeah? And that attachment feeling people get from defeats. That short loop learning, the pat on the back, the ribbon, the medal, the postings, and people look for that sense of minute affirmation, yeah? And it's so powerful, right?
Yeah, it is.
And then you leave, and then you go, my wife hates me, my kids hate me, and cups are always full, and you feel guilty and shameful. But actually, I have this wonder that you guys, all of you, have this sense inside you that says, I know what it feels like to be that kid. I know what it feels like to be the adult. I can convey this experience. I just need a bit of a tool set. I need a bit of a chance and opportunity, yeah? And then permission to be human and not be told, go and look up doctrine, but permission to be human for a while. And if you're lucky, you'll have a mentor, you'll have a spouse, you'll have people around you to go, it's all right. Having a hard day today, and that's all right. Let's start again tomorrow. Yeah? That attachment piece is so powerful.
Great wisdom, and also thank you for giving me time to down-regulate my nervous system. Kieran,
Yeah.
to experience love demands the capacity to open our heart. To open our heart demands the ability to be vulnerable. Most of us, I include myself, have a passionate fear of vulnerability because it's opening up all our defenses. So there's all these things that we do need to work on, and vulnerability takes time. It's being able to receive and find and choose the right kind of love. There's the healing first, and the healing continues in the right environment. So thank you. Gentlemen, ladies, I nearly blew that one, didn't I? Thank you for your contribution. We could go on and on about relationships, but there was good wisdom there, and I appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, so I think where I'd like to move now is if we can move into the one thing where there is always a big struggle, which is when people bring the war back home because of the wounds they carry. I'd like you to think about your own personal journeys and how did that journey impact on friendships as you moved out the military, non-military friendships, and perhaps even to some extent in relationships where you feel it's appropriate to share. Kieran, any thoughts?
Yeah, it's interesting. After being removed so quickly from the military, my go-to modality was anger. I was pretty good at it, and been practicing that since childbirth. So easily getting caught up in high cortisol and all sorts of things, and we can talk about the brain and how it can dislocate the social handbrake, which is the prefrontal area, whatever. Socially speaking, sometimes I would look at someone to either A, see if they wanted to fight, because I did bring that metaphorical war outside, and then hoped and expected them to understand without even knowing my situation. So what that did for me was reflect to go, talking to myself, maybe they don't have an idea what you've went through, who you are, what you're thinking. So I started to coin a term for myself that I'd say I used to gaslight myself into thinking that the other was out to get me, because of a body movement they did, or they didn't acknowledge something I had done. So I used to get that thought that I'm being betrayed by others and interrogate that kindly inside myself. I go, well, how true is that thought? Um, and using some of the premise, I suppose, without knowing at the time, from modalities like acceptance and commitment therapy and so on and so forth. But interrogating it to go, well, what's the truth of that thought? And in its own weird, miraculous way, sometimes forgiveness for myself and the other in that occasion would dissipate any feelings of anger. And
Yeah.
it was a practice, though. I think for any veteran right now, if you close your eyes and pretend taking apart a weapon, you can all be doing it right now in your head. Where I'm going with that is, if we continually repeat and expose ourselves to a certain activity, even behaviorally, you'll change the brain so that becomes a normal new. And so repeating those good behaviors, and so they become a normal new, was fundamental for moving forward in relationships outside of the military.
Thanks, Karen. Yeah, some good tips there for people watching this. Thank you. Appreciate it. Kate?
I'd love to talk into different aspects of relationships that I've personally found, and that's not only relationships outside my family unit, but also within, is seeing in the people around you what it is that you're not seeing within yourself. So then in strengthening that relationship within yourself. So an example being, and a lot of my veteran clients struggle with this, is the kids are so intense. They're like so full on, I'm not coping. And it is when their nervous system is at capacity. But if they have that little bit of fudge room, they can go, okay, well, what is this? Is it me? Is it them? And it gives you that space of introspection to go, okay, well, what are my children here to teach me? Because I believe our children are the greatest teachers in this lifetime. Also, your partner. And in reflection, in my time from leaving full-time service, I've been to workshops in the civilian space where I've been really activated, triggered by people within that space at the time. But then these people have ended up being really good friends of mine. And I always reflect back to them and say, first time I met you, you drove me wild. But I always used that as, all right, what is this person here to teach me? So I think if we approach life with curiosity as veterans, transitioning or even within, right, why does that person annoy me so much? What is in that? It gives you a space to develop your relationship with yourself and with others.
And I like the fact that you did point into the internal journey as well, which is important. Thank you. And Beck, what comes up for you?
I guess similar to Kate, like, what I've learned in my healing and searching is, we meet people where we're at too, right? So everyone's a mirror for us and vice versa. So the question's like, what's going on? What's the lesson here? Like, why is this presenting? Because what's happening in here is going to reflect outside. So, with me and my relationship broke down, but we remained close because we're co-parenting. But, I was moving into a different place, so we couldn't sustain that. And sometimes relationships serve their purpose for a period of time, whatever that might be. But and also the friendships, you keep the people. I'm a collector of friends, and a connector. It's always been one of my, I say, superpower now. But now it's shifting a little bit because of the stuff I'm learning and how my spiritual stuff is kind of where it's leading. And people are, that's a bit wacky, but then you meet others that get it, and it's pretty great. So yeah, I think each relationship serve their purpose in a different way. But it is looking at ourselves. It is the mirror. And the question of, the story in my head, I'm telling myself is this, but you've got to make it true. Find the facts, because then that can completely dissipate and diffuse things. So that was something I learned a bit later. It probably would have been handier earlier. But, especially at home, we take those things out on our families. And I always didn't understand it. The way I'd treat people outside was so different to my family, because you think they're just there all the time and we take it for granted, but it's not always the case.
It's
And
very easy for the family
yeah,
to become the enemy.
yeah.
I agree, because that's one of our most intimate connections. Vulnerability is very risky.
Mhm.
So there's work to be done.
Yeah. So I guess it's just how as we evolve and we grow, just the relationships are different. And you can also, when we people please as well, like we are performative in some ways to be a certain way how we expect others for us to be. But when you learn who you are, you just be yourself, then you find your tribe and the people. And it doesn't have to be a lot of people. It just has to be the right people. And it's all, I guess.
Good one. Thank you. Some good wisdom there. Ian, what comes up from you?
Yeah, interesting. Our relationships. Yeah, I know do relationships real well. And my wife would, I think, have a good chuckle if she knew I was talking about it the other day. In fact, I, 26 years after getting injured, I'm going out next weekend with a mate where I've just moved to. I've only ever talked to him on LinkedIn, and I'm making the moves now to connect with people 26 years after getting injured. Because in that time, and I think a lesson here for people that are injured, when you're injured, you quite often focus on it so much that it's the only thing you talk about. And people get really, really bored of listening to you talk about the same thing all the time. And I end up having to put an elastic band on, just remind myself, click to get it off. But it took someone I didn't know to tell me, hey mate, I'm really sick to death of hearing about it. And that's how I learned. And I think it's a lesson to pass on to people. And I think that the paradox of anger with the person that you love the most, your partner, in my case, my wife, it is so easy to get really angry at your wife, in my case, my wife, my partner, because they're your loved ones. I don't know why it's so easy, but it's so easy. And I think we need to be aware of that. And I think hand in hand with that is medication. We talked before about the fog of medication. It wasn't until 20 odd years after I started taking medication for anxiety and depression that I got the right tablet that told me and allowed me to actually feel the trigger from whatever my wife had said, feel it coming on, and I could cut it off and say, "Oh, it's not important to win that discussion." If it was a win at all, I'm not too sure, but I could park that aside. So I think try to take control of some of those things to help your relationships. If you're finding that medication, if you're finding that anger does things, take control and move yourself through it. Because again, all these things are things that ambush you, as you say in your book, and prepare yourself and your family for all those activities, all those incidents that can happen. And if people can hear this before they get out, I think that will assist them in that planning that
Thanks.
transition.
So the importance of really understanding the territory of relationships, both internally and externally. Yeah, good stuff. Michelle, how's your journey been?
Yeah, I want to flick over to Ian. I believe that medication has its place as well. Without the Ritalin, oh man, I wouldn't be here right now, and you really wouldn't want me to be here. Um, um, and again, everyone has their own journey, and if you get offered medication and you don't think it's for you, just take your time, think about it. Have as many discussions as you want with the medical person and get them really to explain what's the side effects. When can I go off this medication again? Can I do it immediately? You don't have to take it and be on it forever. So you've certainly got agency. So just think about it, and you still might not ever go on it, and that's okay. But just be open-minded about it. Similarly with psychology, I gave us a bit of a bad rap, but we, I think, just take things slow. A lot of people say to me, or they'll come to me and say, look, that mindfulness shit, it didn't do anything. this person didn't understand. It's like, how a breathing meant to change my life. They were such an idiot. And you're right, doing one thing is not going to change anything. And I find it's thousands of little things that you do across time, which makes you have the life that you want to live, even though it's going to be really different. And so I just encourage people just to stick with it a little bit, or at least take what you can from that person and maybe move on to the next, or until you feel comfortable. But yes, one thing won't change anything, neither will five. But when you keep going and you learn across time and you pick up extra skills, just like we have in the past in the service, then you will get where you want to go. Yeah.
Great, Michelle. And I mean, I always think that between ourselves and another lies the many parts of ourselves and the many parts of the other, and how we learn to navigate and be informed about that. The more work we can do prior to that journey, the more effective we can become. Because boy, it's tricky and it's complex. Thank you. And Andrew, I'd be very interested to hear your thoughts from a more spiritual based point
Thanks,
of
Darren. Thank you for what you shared before the camera went on too. That was really significant. So I'm going to speak theologically now. So watch out.
Yeah.
I want to say relationships are not important. And they're not essential. They're everything. They're actually everything. There's no purpose that doesn't actually involve other human beings. There's no show me one. I'd love to hear if you think you've got a purpose that doesn't involve other human beings. Relationships are everything. If we're not facing towards people, so I love that language in your book, Barry, and which way we're facing. If we're not facing towards people, that can only end in disaster. That can only end in destruction. There's no other possible outcome for that. And yet, interestingly, as I talk to veterans, as I talk to serving members at Navy, all I hear is disastrous relationship stories and situations, family, partners, children. It's just the theme. It's what's going on, and that's just such a tragedy, such a tragedy. Even colleagues. So the most important relationships to us, the longest held ones, the dearest ones, they're the ones that, in the end, when they go wrong, are devastated. So there is so much of a connection with our identity that comes from our relationships. I am a father. I am a mother. I am a child. I'm a brother, a sister. Those things are core. Meaning comes from relationships. In the end, purpose, meaning, identity, it's all about relationships. Relationships are everything. And yet, so often, that's where the problems manifest.
Love it. Andrew, as we finish off this section, I've said it before, but the core philosophy in Africa is Ubuntu. I am who I truly am in the presence of who we all are. And truly in relationships, we heal. Relationships with those around us, with the figures inside us, and with that which lies beyond us. And I love that you embody that so beautifully. So thank you for your words. And guys, thank you. I think people watching this, may their relationships thrive. Okay? Thanks, guys.